Person who joined by phone. Would the person please who joined by phone, please identify yourself for the record?
Hi, this is David Cheatwood from First Tryon. I'm the county's financial advisor. Lori Thomas sent me the dial-in.
Thank you.
Eighth, 2022, Administration and Finances Committee to order. If you would please call for the roll.
Malinowski.
Here.
McBride.
Present.
Livingston.
Here.
Joe Walker.
Here.
Mackey.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Item number 2, approval of the minutes for May 24th, 2022. I'll entertain a motion. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Carrillo?
Malinowski.
Yes.
McBride. Yes. Livingston.
Yes.
Joe Walker.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Approval of the agenda. Any changes?
None requested, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Call for the motion first, please. For
Motion
approval
to
of the
approve
agenda.
the agenda.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. No discussion. Ms. Carrillo?
Malinowski.
Yes.
McBride.
Yes.
Livingston.
Yeah.
Joe Walker.
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay, item number 4, items for action. Attorney Wright, once we approve the agenda, do we have to take them up in this order?
No, it doesn't have to be. It's not required to be in that same order.
Okay, I didn't think, but I wanted to make sure. And I would just make a recommendation because we've got 3 items down here that I believe are time sensitive, B and C with the public works matter and D for the sheriff's department. And A, while it is a bond matter, I'm thinking there may be a little more discussion on that one. And I would like to give the opportunity for council members to ask questions and possibly even get answers from Director Stringfellow, who is here in the audience. So that's why I would like to take up the county business of what seemed to me to be time-sensitive matters first, and then come along to the bond. If there, Ms. McBride.
By the protocol, we don't have. Order the agenda.
No, ma'am, it's on there, so it's up to the chair to determine what order he goes in.
I'm fine with that. I just wanted to make.
Yeah, I'm making a recommendation unless there's some real heartburn on doing that. If I don't hear any real pushback, then that's what we'll do. We'll start with number 4B. Administrator Brown.
Thank you for being recognized, Mr. Chair. This item follows with the process by which council communicated to staff to go back with their current contractors and work through the process of re-engaging them. This item and the following item is a process that we've already put in place with other areas. And so we are recommending approval consistent with previous actions related to solid waste contracts for services. And this particular one is in area 2, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Brown. I will entertain a motion for 4B, Department of Public Works Solid Waste and Recycling Division, Collection Area 2, a contract amendment / extension.
Move to approve is recommended.
Okay, we got a motion from Mr. Joe Walker to approve and second by McBride. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Carrillo?
Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Item number 4C, Department of Public Works Solid Waste and Recycling Division, Collection Area 4, contract amendment / extension. We already heard from the administrator who said this one is similar to the one we just approved. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Carrillo?
Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Item number 4D, Richland County Sheriff's Department, additional school resource officer, Keenan High School. That's on pages 106 to 110 of the agenda. Administrator Brown?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. As you pointed out on page 106, under additional fiscal and budgetary matters to consider, you can see where it says Richland School District 1 has agreed to cover all expenses related to adding the school resource officer to Keenan High School. With that understanding, Mr. Chair, it is the recommendation that this item be approved.
Thank you, Administrator Brown.
Mr. Chair. Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? I've got one discussion here, and that is in the memorandum of agreement on page 108. It does say that the school district 1 at Keenan High for school year 22 and 23. What happens if they no longer want the SRO beyond this one school year?
Mr. Chair, if we can recognize Chief Polis to address that, sir, on behalf of the Sheriff's Department.
Good afternoon, Deputy Chief Post, the Sheriff's Office. We have no reason to believe that School District 1 will not want to continue the Keenan High School SRO into perpetuity. So
Yeah, that's something like all schools. They just keep it going.
Correct. They're going to keep it going, sir.
Okay, and the dollar figures where it says that they are covering all costs, it's kind of like what we discussed, I guess, when Chief Cowan was here, that they are paying for everything,
Yes, they are paying for everything.
even for the out of school time.
Yes, sir.
Right, okay. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead, Ms. Maggie.
Thank you, Ms. Manosty. Chief Polis. It's okay. And so this is for 2022-23 school year. So is it, I guess, am I correction that you would bring this back every year for them to continue?
This would become part of our normal MOU process,
Okay.
and every year this would renew.
Thank you. That was all I had.
Okay, another one, Chief, and that is in on the last page of our agenda where you have the the costs it's attachment to. Why is there such a huge discrepancy between the operating costs for first year and second year? Is that because of the equipment?
Yes, sir. Equipment purchases, first-time purchases versus recurring costs.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we've got a motion and a second. Ms. Carrillo?
Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
And now we'll go to item number 4A. I move to consider Riverbanks Parks Commission petition to allow the Riverbanks Park District to issue not to exceed $80 million in general obligation bonds to make improvements at Riverbanks Zoo and Gardens. That information is on pages 9 to 31 of your agenda. Administrator Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you mentioned, beginning on page about 9 of your briefing packet, you do have information that was submitted by Riverbank Zoo representing their petition to County Council through this committee. We do have in the audience a number of members, including representation from Riverbank Zoo, financial, I believe also, and legal. And Mr. Chair, I think it would be appropriate if you have questions concerning this request that they be recognized to address any of those questions for your consideration.
Okay, thank you, Administrator Brown. I will entertain a motion first, and even if it's for discussion purposes, and then we can get to any questions anyone has.
I move for discussion purposes.
Got a motion
Second.
and a second for discussion purposes. Discussion. Ms.
We start to give
McBride.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chair,
go
maybe for them to give us a brief overview, it might be better. They
Okay,
have some comments from them.
okay. Director Stringfellow, you want to do that or appoint someone else?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tommy Stringfellow, President and CEO of Riverbank Zoo and Garden. Trying to sum it up, periodically, and it's about every 10 years, we look at ways to continue the growth of riverbanks by increasing our not only animal collection that fits our conservation efforts, but also to look for ways to continue drawing tourists from outside of the region, as well as keeping locals wanting to come back. And over the years, let's see, this will be our 5th out of almost 50 years request for a major influx of capital dollars that allow us to do overhaul not only our infrastructure, but to add new exhibits that keep the zoo fresh, keeps the garden relevant to all the new technology as well as we add, and continue growing the attendance so that the economic impact can return on the investment of the taxpayers. This particular bond allows us to add, and in the packet it would show A through H, some of the new animal exhibits, being able to capture the excitement of what's going on at the Saluda Riverwalk, in terms of how everybody is wanting to get on the river. We're looking at a way, since we are on the river, to expose both sides of the river and allow our guests to not only enjoy the scenic river views, but also to see some of the new animals, and also to keep our accreditation, which every 5 years we have to go through, making sure that our animal exhibits meet all the welfare standards of today. And although we, year after year, try to chip away at our infrastructure, not the sexy things of parking lots and sewer lines and rooftops, this allows us to take it a step forward by adding the new exhibits and to keep the area, keep the zoo fresh for tourists that come year after year. So that kind of in a nutshell is what we do about every 10 years. And we were prepared to do this prior to COVID hit the pause button, knowing that that probably wasn't a good time to ask the taxpayers for their investment. As now we know that the rates are starting to climb for bonds, and that the animals that we've identified for our collection are becoming increasingly harder to get. It takes a couple of years once we've identified what we can get to build exhibits for them. The timing seemed to be right to come ask both Richland and Lexington for the investment.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
For clarification, I would like to direct it to Administrator Brown because he might be able to better answer this. Mr. Brown, this bonding is separate from the other bonds that the county council, that the county has. Is that so?
That's correct.
So it does not impact our bonding status at all?
Not in the way that it messes with our cap space. For us, it does not. But we do have financial folks here who represent who we utilize that could also speak to that. But you're correct. This is not a direct impact for our cap space for our funds.
I've got a couple questions here, Mr. Stringfellow. In our agenda package, we've got one column here with about 10 years left. It says 2020 general obligation bonds. Are they still being paid for?
Correct, they are.
Okay, now they're being paid for at what type of a tax level for the residents?
That I may defer to Robert Hobson with First Tryon. That was the bond that was issued in 2013. It was a $32 million bond. And that one has 10 more years to go and will roll off. But Robert, can I ask you to?
So you would actually be paying for the old one and the new one simultaneously?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Actually, turn to page 28.
Where I'm at.
Yeah, okay. And hold your finger on 27 as well. So look at 27 and 28. So
you're going to make me do this.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's why I printed it on two different pages.
Okay.
So page 27 is only the proposed $80 million of new bonds. And on the far right-hand column, given the interest rate environment we're in, you see that the estimated millage requirement would be 180 to 185, somewhere below 2 mills. If you turn to page 28 and look at that same far right-hand column, you'll notice that those numbers are a little bit higher in the first 10 years because that's both the proposed bonds as well as the existing 2020 bonds that you see over on the left-hand side. So to answer your question, right now, the millage requirement on the 20 bonds is below 1 mil. It's basically, for example, in year 24, it's the difference between 263 and 83, which I'm doing math in my head. It's 0.8 mils on the existing 2020 bonds, plus 1.83 that we're projecting on the new proposed bonds to get you to the 263 overall that you see on page 28. And then you'll see that once you get past year 2033 and you get down to 2034 on page 28, you'll see that it drops from 250 to 166. That's because the 2020 bonds are paid off. And from there on, the two right-hand columns on each page exactly match each other because all that you're left with at that point is the 2022 proposed new bonds.
Okay, and on page 29, your next page where it shows the annual cost of an owner-occupied 100,000 home, 2023, 407. And I guess that's because it's only part of the year versus 2024 where it goes up to 734.
That's correct. It's let me get back to the microphone. It's actually because the bonds would have been issued and outstanding only for a partial time period for a partial year. So the millage wouldn't need to be set as high because there wouldn't be as much debt service on the bonds in that partial year. But so it's more accurate to look once a full year hits, which would be 24 through the end. And like you said, on a $100,000 owner occupied 4% type home, you can see what that would cost based on a $100,000 valuation.
Okay, now has Lexington County and the City of Columbia agreed to approve this bond?
At this point, Lexington is looking at their schedule in terms of putting this up for first reading too. It's got to go to their committee as well. And they obviously, we know they're working on their penny tax, so they've asked us to look at the 1st of August for their committee to evaluate and then go to first reading.
So we've got a few moving parts here, and until they all come together, it can't materialize, correct?
Correct. Both councils have to go through all 3 readings and approvals before the bonds could be issued. We know it's not going to be in time for the taxpayer increase this year, so it would take effect in 2024.
Okay. Now, this may seem like a strange question, but you did send me a video that I watched. Can you tell me when that video was made? Was it very recently or a while ago?
We made it 2 years ago in preparation for rolling that out. At that time, we had to go in there and update some of the folks that were speaking. Some were no longer in their chairs at that time. So we did update it, but yes, it's relevant to what we're asking for right now.
Okay, now what will the additional cost for personnel and operations be annually, do you guesstimate?
Yeah, so we're looking
versus the dollars you're bringing in.
Correct. So we're glad these particular animals, we already have trained staff on board. There'd be a minimal number of keepers added. Maintenance staff, we figured total between 3 to 5 and all together probably 25 employees that we would need for the operations that we would add. Salaries would be less than 200,000 additional a year.
Which is that?
200,000.
About 200,000 more per year. And what do you estimate then the additional take at the gate would be?
So we have a structure laid out such that as we add these attractions or add these exhibits, and it's part of our strategic plan anyway, to continue increasing the gate as well. So it's kind of twofold. This video that you may have seen also included this new transportation system, a gondola. That's also not only a transportation provider, but it's a revenue generator. Could generate for us about $500,000 a year in revenue, but to offset the costs of building and maintaining that. So we could possibly, I believe, by the time we have all of the exhibits open, we'd be looking at an additional 400,000 people in additional attendance. We're at about 1.1 million in attendance right now. We project almost 1.5 million that would come once we have the new exhibits open. Economic impact, we estimate about an additional 30 million a year. From what we are at right now is about 150 million a year in economic impact, but we think we would drive an additional 30 million to the local economy in terms of jobs and spending in the park and around the community.
You see a point where you're going to have your gate ticket point where it will no longer be beneficial and you'll have to kind of keep it there or reduce it?
So the good news is the more we learn as we grow, the more we become efficient. We will always see an increase in our gate and also food and beverage. But that requires that investment, that periodic investment to drive people back to the zoo because there's something new to see and new to do. I don't ever foresee a time where it'll stay level as the price of goods go up, as we're seeing right now. Materials and animal feed and maintenance requests are continuing to climb. So we continually raise our prices and look for other revenue opportunities to offset those costs.
And you brought up something that kind of leads me into it. You mentioned your gondola. What kind of liability are you going to have regarding insurance and all for something like that?
It's less than the liability we currently have running the trams up and down the hills with, yes. So,
Figure it's safer to fall into the water than run down the cliff.
Let's hope that doesn't happen. We follow we look at all the trends that theme parks and cities across the world are actually now adding gondolas and aerial tram because there's not enough road, not enough traffic, not enough roads to support the traffic. So we're seeing a big trend across not only this country, Europe and all the other countries are way ahead of us on that. And aerial transportation seems to be the safer route, the more efficient route. And it's also, exciting too, because you have a different form of transportation. So
I see backups to Harbison now on I-27.
That's right.
Right.
yeah,
Well,
I
that's a
think
good thing then.
Got to start looking at gondolas.
What about something like animal feces runoff into the water surrounded this area where you're going to be putting new animals?
Yeah. So every bit of the design of these exhibits and these particular animals, it actually goes to sewer, not to the river. If we have some
Columbia sewer, right?
That's right. Columbia sewer and process such. But yeah, any native animals that are native to the river, most of that stormwater runoff would be river, but all the sanitation from animal exhibits go into the sewer.
Thank you. I'm done. Ms. Mackey and then Ms. Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And then Mr. Livingston.
I had a question back on page 29, looking at the estimated cost to taxpayer. And so we have the 2023 amount and the 2024 to 2042. Is that $4.07? Is that including the bond that is already open? Does that make sense? Or is this in addition to?
I'm going to say yes on that. The $4
That's only for
the current.
for the proposed.
Proposed.
Yes,
So
right.
this would be an additional $4.07.
Correct.
Okay. And then the second question I had is, was there any consideration into maybe a phased approach where we're not doing the full project right now or the full 80 million and looking at a phased approach and what that dollar amount might be for the taxpayer right now?
Yes, we looked at a couple of different ways to source this and roll this out. Obviously now the 40 to 50 million that you use to build is more like a 60 to 70 million. It would be a minimal $1 or $2 less per household than the $7.50 that would get you the 80 million. It didn't seem to have that much of an impact on the taxpayer household by staging it at, say, 40 million the first 5 years, then another 40 million, because we know the cost of building in 4 or 5 years will be a lot higher. And it would, obviously mean coming back and asking for an additional bond in less than 5 years. But the materials we know right now, if we start with this $80 million bond, is going to take us a 3 to 5 year build out to begin with. And when we started reducing the package, it gave us some great animal exhibits, but it took away a lot of the amenities that we think will attract that additional 400,000 in attendance. It needs to be more of an impactful investment than just a 1 or 2 signature animal exhibits or a restaurant or a gondola. So the strategy was to try to package all that together that made sense with the animals we're putting in, as well as the transportation that we're providing. And then we have to increase our restrooms, increase our food and beverage to accommodate those additional animal exhibits that we add, so we can make sure that the visitor amenities go along with it. So it didn't seem to make sense to pull it back from what we had. The actual whole package was about 150 million, so we did kind of dial it back to what we thought would be the priority exhibits at that time.
Then I know that it's, Richland and Lexington County are the kind of main entities when looking at how the Riverbank Zoo is shaped, but has there been any indication from the City of Columbia that they are supportive, and are they bringing anything to the table as you look to bring this attraction to Columbia?
Yeah, maybe Theo can better answer that one, but since they are in the county of Richland, the taxpayers in the city are just as much affected as the taxpayers outside of the city. In terms of asking for their investments, yes, we've asked for ways that they can support us in different ways. In terms of as we grow, like the restaurant, that may affect more of their hospitality and accommodations tax, we do ask for more dollars from the city in those forms.
You done, Ms. Mackey?
I am. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you, Ms. Barron, and then Mr. Livingston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Mackey and I are on the same wavelength, so I won't repeat those questions because I had the very same question specifically to the phase approach. I guess my question as a follow-up to Ms. Mackey, you spoke about the City of Columbia, but we all know that the Riverbank Zoo is the attraction of the state. So when we look at attractions of the state, has there even been any financial investment from the state, the government and our legislators as far as investing into this project?
So we, for the longest period of time, had not stepped into the state space since we were considered regional, and the times we attempted to, they felt like the counties were doing a great job, obviously. And so we did about 2 years ago, prior to COVID, hire a lobbyist to help us navigate the state space. And yes, we've presented these packages to us, and we were fortunate this past week to receive some dollars, not as much as we asked for, but we did get some state support, and it would be applied toward the infrastructure that we currently have issues with, which then will allow us to take the bond dollars and apply them toward the new animal exhibits, to the new attractions, and not have to spend the bond dollars on the sewers and the roofing and things like that. So we did get some state money, and we'll continue going after them. We do feel there's, and hopefully you've seen, we ask for private donations quite a bit. That is part of this whole package. Is we really feel like that the private still has some opportunity to partner. The Voids recently partnered with us for about an $8 million increase, which they wanted to go to some of the exhibits that were part of this master plan. The original video shows the aquarium as one of the single largest attractions inside the zoo that we felt needed a lot of help. And so the Boyd's money went to update that aquarium. And we're fortunate that that started last year, and we'll have that exhibit ready to open late this year, which will help the continuity and the growth until we can get to the next phase. So we will go just as hard after the private dollars and the state dollars as we will, asking you guys for bond.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just a follow-up, and that is, I think it's great that the state is supporting infrastructure projects, and that's going to definitely be wonderful in getting you off started. But it sounds like the plan is to continue to ask for support, just as you are a millage agency here in Richland County. I do think that there's room for conversation to be a part of the state budget. Y'all know I'm a fan of the zoo. Y'all got us through COVID. I'm a fan of it, but at the same time, I think that we can't close our eyes to note that your worth in this state. So definitely to be able to continue to invest in those dollars or to go after them on a regular basis. And then lastly, I just say that I do support, the zoo and this project. I'm just concerned about the timing of it. And if we could just look at some way that we could start some of it and just kind of just continue to add on. It's a hard hit. We just did budgets with other millage agencies, and we asked them to, do more with less, or what you got last year. And so I do have some challenges being able to, really go full steam ahead with this when just a couple of weeks ago, I didn't support an increase, and I still feel the same way. I just don't know how we can get this project off the ground without impacting the homes in Richland County. Thank you.
Hey, Ms. Barron, Mr. Livingston.
I'll be brief since most of my questions have been answered, but let me just thank our zoo colleagues for their current commitment to the kind of what the zoo does for our county, and also an appreciation for your vision as to how you want to move forward. What I like to have, and I don't need it right now, is just a better understanding of the impact this is going to really have on the revenue as you project moving forward, as well as the operational costs. I think those things will be important. Did you all gauge any feedback from participants, the public, and so forth in terms of any support or ideas? It would just be great for the community. Were you able to get any feedback?
Yes, sir. We are at a little over 50,000 households now in the two counties from our membership, and we continually talk with them, survey them, ask what they would like to see with the zoo. We also spend a lot of time with our little over 300 staff members to see what animals and part of the conservation that we obviously are as our mission's based on. What can we do on the animal side that not only can protect, preserve, and or contribute to the growth of the population, but also what would inspire guests to want to come see. So, even though members are taxpayers and still find a way to invest as a membership, is kind of speaks for itself that they want to continue seeing the zoo grow. So when things like gas prices hit $4 and $5, they stay home, and we have an incredible zoo to offer them. And, as we know, these dollars allow us to give free admission to not just the members, but also to non-members at least 8 times a year, in the free schools as well. And we think these dollars will also continue allowing us to offer that back to the taxpayer as an incentive for supporting the zoo. But also that these dollars, this $80 million that we would ask for, because we're a procurement agency, just like counties are and other states are, we focus spending that $80 million right here in the community. So I like to say the money comes through the zoo, not to the zoo, that we would turn around and hire the construction companies, the architects, the engineers, the subcontractors. So it would be an influx of this bond money right here into both counties. So it was a win-win for those that we talked to, Mr. Livingston. It felt like they want to see the zoo grow. They don't want to see it sit stale. And typically after a major investment, we hit our peak attendance, and then it'll drop down and lay steady for a while unless we continue investing in it.
Based on adequate public feedback.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair.
Welcome, Mr. Livingston. Anyone else? Ms. Mackey.
Thank you. Just a question about the numbers and knowing where we are right now with the economy. These projections that you have, I mean, and I guess it's kind of hard at this point to project out, but we know interest rates are only going up. So what you projected here, have we kind of looked at, okay, what will this look like next year?
Right.
And what our interest rate, and what is it really going to cost us to borrow this 80 million versus what's here now? Are you anticipating a larger
if you don't mind me letting
increase?
Mr. Hobson, our first try and finance, and give you a good answer to that, that would be great.
Thank you. Just to be clear that I understand the question so that I can address it. So if this bond issue is to be approved and the bonds are to be issued, either the full 80 million or some portion thereof, the interest rate on those bonds will be locked in whenever they're sold. So that is probably not at the end of this year, it's probably into next year at this point in time. So yes, there is some interest rate risk that rates could rise between today and when the bonds are actually issued. We built in to the numbers that we talked about earlier in the required millage, some cushion, not an extra 1%. In this environment, and don't exactly quote me on this because I was just looking at some numbers, anticipating a question like this. This borrowing would come at about 3.25%, give or take, which is still historically very low for a 20-year financing, but it is higher than it was 6 months ago, and hopefully things won't continue to rise like you've seen mortgage rates and whatnot. So to answer your question, there is that risk between today where we're conservatively estimating the numbers that we've talked about in the resulting millage, that if it goes up materially, and we actually ran some stress tests to see what it would take to get that less than 2 mills that was on page 28, I believe, it was like 1.83 or something like that. To get it up over to 2, go to the prior, the 2 more back. Right there. So to get the interest rates would have to jump up about another 50 to 75 basis points for us to go over 2 mills versus where we're assuming today. So a decent bit of cushion, but things can happen. And that's on the full 80 million.
Thank you.
Sir, can you state that again? Interest rates would have to jump up how much to go over the 2 mills?
And I'd like to follow up as we ran that analysis. I don't have it right in front of me, and I can follow up with that exact answer. But my memory is that it's a fairly substantial amount from where we are today to get to over the two.
And I'm wondering, because you indicated that the actual percentage or interest rate, let's say that mills is one thing, but what happens if the interest rate goes up 1% by the time the bonds are actually sold? What would those figures look like on the taxable?
I can confirm this, but that's what if interest rates were to go up a full 1% from 3.25 today to say 4.25, my memory is that we would go over the 2 mills. Not much, but if it was more something like a 0.5 percentage point or 0.75 percentage point, then that's when you start to approach the 2. I just don't have that information right in front of me. But that's
and just a ballpark then, if it went up to the 2 mills, about how would that change the, what was it, $7 and change?
It would, if it went up to 2 mills, it would change $7 and change to $8 and change.
Anyone else? Ms. McBride.
Follow-up question. You know, I am the zoo. This is something that we really would like to help with. I would. My question is that we had other millage agencies, of course, we denied them and increased. So Mr. Livingston said something about you received input from the citizens. Is that so? I'm wondering if we had the opportunity to see how the citizens feel about this increase. So that's my question. I'm just following up. Did you say that you had received some input? And then if not, I think Mr. Malinowski, we will be having public hearings if it moves forward, right? And to ensure that we got input from our citizenry. So
right, there will have to be a public hearing held, correct?
Right.
So again, I'll let you answer.
Councilman McBride, thank you. Yes, our input was on the master plan that we held onto that so we could present to the council first, both Lexington and Richland. We wanted to make sure that you guys knew we had a plan, had a strategy, and as part of being the CEO, wanted to come to you to show how we could grow the zoo with the taxpayer dollars. We have not shown the taxpayers or have talked to the taxpayers about what this means. I bounced it off some friends. I think our staff talks to their spouses about what this $7.50 would mean to them. And, of course, I'm talking to those that I see a lot, and they felt like that's a minimal amount for what they get in return for the free visits and for what the future of Riverbanks could be, but not in a public survey have we gone out to say, look, what would you think about a millage increase of 1.7 mills, which is about $7.50 per 100,000 household. We do know during the public hearing there will be those that I'm sure will make comment on that at that time for sure.
Else?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Joe Walker.
as a follow-up along the same lines of interrogative as Ms. McBride. More a procedural question, probably for Attorney Wright, and maybe, Mr. Chair, you know the answer, having been there for a while. You know, I remember vividly, whether it was the penny tax or Richland District 2 bond referendum. I think there was a District 1 bond referendum. At some point, from a public notice perspective, it was actually put to a vote. Is there a line in the sand threshold? Is it a size of bond? What are the triggers for this actually being put to a referendum and put on a ballot to allow the taxpayers to vote on this project?
And Attorney Wright's leaning forward, getting ready to give you an answer.
Yeah, my answer is Mr. Ray Jones is here. He can speak to that.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening. So the question is, when do you have to have a bond referendum? That's what I heard Mr. Walker ask. And in this case, it really comes down to how much capacity does the zoo have to issue in terms of its assessed value. And as you can tell, having the combined assessed value of both Richland and Lexington counties, the assessed value is substantial. So only in the instance where they would need to go over their constitutional debt limit, would they need to go to the voters and ask for them to specifically authorize the issuance of debt for them. Otherwise, they have the ability, just like the county does, to issue within its constitutional debt limit.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I'll do a follow-up on that one, and that is, what is their constitutional debt limit and where are they?
Let Mr. Hobson speak to that.
I mean, it's a huge number that they're not
It's-
even close to.
Then I'll give you the math, Mr. Malinowski. How about that? The math is 8% times 3 billion. So you're talking about a substantial amount of money.
You got plenty. Hey, anyone else? Not, we do have a motion on the floor. If the maker of that motion wants to stay with it or change it. And that motion was to, it was an approval for discussion, which would, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. McBride, I believe you were the maker of the motion, and I believe it was in order for the recommended action that's requested here for the Riverbanks Zoo recommends approval of the resolution for a public hearing and first reading of the ordinance to issue $80 million bond. Okay. All right, well, we got a motion and a second then, if there's no additional discussion. The motion is to send to council a recommendation for approval for the Riverbanks Zoo District to issue a resolution for a public hearing and first reading of the ordinance to issue an $80 million bond referendum. Not referendum, $80 million bond. Okay, that's the motion. Ms. Carrillo? I don't remember who seconded that. Was it Ms. Mackey? Right.
Malinowski,
So it is not on the consent agenda, and council members not here have the opportunity to ask additional questions if they want. I will vote no.
McBride. Livingston,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
Yes, because Mr. Malinowski did what I was going to do.
Mackey,
Yes, but I would like additional information before it goes to council.
motion approved.
Okay, now, Ms. Maggie asked for additional information. Who is it recommended we should send that to? Mr. Administrator, please, can you answer that one?
Yes, sir. So for ease of transmission of information, please send it to the administrator. And I will forward that information to Mr. Stringfellow and his team.
And if you'd please include all council members on any requests for information and any responses to those requests.
Will do.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Walker?
one additional request for information would be, I think there's relevance to staying attuned to what our adjacent counties and other contributors are doing throughout this process. So, Mr. Administrator, I would request that you also keep this committee and council informed of the progress of this motion through Lexington County's process as well.
Understood.
Thank you.
Livingston.
I won't forget, I know I'd like to have a little bit more detailed information regarding the impact on the revenue as well as operational costs.
Okay. Maggie?
Yes, and just so we're clear, the additional information that I would like to receive is in relation to kind of the chart that we talked about with the interest rates and additional millage stuff.
Yes, ma'am.
Else for now, and if you think of something later, go ahead and send it to the administrator, please. Item number 5A, items pending analysis, no action required. Direct staff and CASA to look into what it will take to have Richland County CASA receive state funding to operate the way all other CASA groups in the state do with state funding. See, once again, the state said we're doing such a great job, we can keep doing it. Richland County should not be excluded from something provided to all other counties by the state. Administrator Brown?
So staff has begun looking into this item. Mr. Malinowski, as you may recall, and for those of you who are not aware, this does require a change from the state level because there are rules in place that say that currently we're not eligible to receive funding from the state. So that would require a change at the state level. So that is something that CASA has begun looking into, but today we don't have an answer that has happened, but it would take state action to change that rule that's currently in place.
Okay. B, 5B. I'm going to shorten this up and summarize it, and that was creating a new IGA regarding Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center about inmate per diem, so that all entities using that facility are paying the rate that it's costing Richland County, not something that's a year or 2 years old. And if you could just give us an update on that, Administrator Brown.
We do have some current expenses that we have added, as you may be aware, in terms of services that we're providing, staffing-wise, both medical and personnel. That information would go into a calculation that would then be provided to other agencies. But because we have some moving targets right now, Mr. Malinowski, that has not been set. But we expect that we'll be able to have something related to this, hopefully within the first quarter of our fiscal year.
Thank you. And 5C, the last item, any agency receiving funds from the county must provide an accounting for those funds prior to a request for funds in the next fiscal year, so that we have accountability for taxpayer dollars.
Yes, sir. This sounds like it applies mainly to the folks that we fund. I didn't think this was like departments or other agencies, but maybe those folks that we provide kind of like grant funding to.
Tax grant funding and your other outside agencies, be it the solicitor, the sheriff, everyone. So there's some state law saying we can't request that.
No, we certainly can request it, but I was thinking related to those agencies that we provide grant funding to. We do have a grant process in place, and so if they're not compliant with that, they already have to. That will restrict them from being able to get these funds. But in terms of other agencies like your departments you just listed, I may to get a little bit more clarity from you on specifically what you're looking for from there, because I would just think their overall operational budget that they present to you, maybe what I have to figure out what you're looking for, I guess, exactly.
Yeah, well, that's why I said any agency when I made the motion. I'm looking for how they're spending the money we're giving them. We never see it. We approve budget year after year after year, and we never have any accounting coming back telling us that it was spent according to the way it should have been spent. That's where I was going with that.
Understood. So what I can do is I could share this information with all parties, find out what feedback they have, and then present information to this body about how we could do that as a part of our budget process. Does that sound like it would resolve your?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Okay, we're up to, Ms. Mackey?
Just so I'm clear, any department that falls under Richland County, don't we already know what they spend their money on? Because they have to track for
Yeah,
invoice
they have
and
to report it to
reimbursement.
the administrator. I'm hoping
Okay.
they do.
So we're not referring to county departments. You're referring to outside
Right.
agencies.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Further discussion on anything? Motion for adjournment?
So move, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion to second, Ms. Carrillo? Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Joe Walker,
Yes.
Mackey.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you, everyone.